Yeah, you mentioned everybody being here. I think it's a great thing that we're able to do things like this and get together. And when Mike asked me to do it, of course I was all in, and I appreciate y'all setting everything up because I think it takes a lot of members in the church to make things happen. So I do want to recognize what you and David do from helping us organize and put things together. So thank you for that. You know, so tonight I'm talking about God as a friend. And so I felt like the only way to start that off was to talk a little bit about myself, because I think the reality is most of the time we go through life knowing people's names but not knowing them. And I think there's a big difference in that. And so so there's a lot of you that I might know your name, or we've talked a little bit, and then of course some of us, we're in groups together. And I think it just speaks to, in those groups, of how we actually get to truly know each other. And so so my name is Chris Steele, for those of you who don't know my name. But just a few things about me is, of course, I was born and raised in Georgia. My accent gives that away. There's no hiding that, no matter where I go. It's either Georgia or Alabama are the guesses. And so, you know, so that is what it is. But no, so I grew up in Ringgold, had a great family growing up. And but one of the things about my family was that my dad worked a lot to provide for our family. And you know, when I was raising up and growing up, I had grandparents that were very dedicated to going to church, and I would go from them to church from time to time. But by and large part, for me and in my faith, I felt like it was, you know, if you do good, that was good enough. And of course, I know better than that now. But in saying that, I didn't really go to church and really find my faith until I was an adult. And it was my late 20s when I started going to church. But it wasn't until my 30s that I would say that I was a Christian. And so so a big piece of that for me is anytime I talk with people, one of the things that it makes me realize is, one, how uncomfortable people could be coming in here. For us, I think it's something that we take for granted at times. But working the coffee bar, I can regularly see people come in, and I see the look on their face, and that is an opportunity that we can engage and talk with them. But in doing it as an adult, it also helps me keep the perspective that one of the most important things that we could do is help others that are far from God pursue Him. And so, so often when I speak, that's something that I talk about, is that, you know, I'll never forget the first time I heard God talking to me. I was sitting in a church building, and He told me I needed to read 1 Timothy out of the Bible, and I couldn't even have told you that was a chapter in the Bible. And so, of course, I went home and I did that. And so, you know, just building on that. So that's a little bit about me, so that you get to know me. But just to get into our conversation tonight and talk about friendship, and I think before we talk about God as a friend, we first want to spend some time talking about what it is to be a friend, because I think that helps shape, you know, being a good friend helps us shape our behaviors and what we would need to act like in a relationship with God. So our scripture will be from John 15:13 through 15. But before I get in that scripture, I just want to talk a little bit about groups. You know, for many of us, we were a part of the first men's discipleship that came out. Does everybody remember the first verse that we covered? It's the first one in our multiply group. Proverbs.
Oh, yeah. 27:17.
Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. You see, that to me, one of the things that I have gotten from discipleship and from our multiply group are friends. You know, if you look at it, when we first started coming to Crosspoint a few years ago, when we came here, one of the big reasons why we came here was because our kids had friends here that were a part of the church. But there were some acquaintances we had, but as far as coming in and being a part of the church, you know, I didn't really have a lot of people that we knew right away, but I think we've been able to build friendships through that. And so Proverbs 27:17, I think, is a big thing to remember when we talk about friendships, because to me, that's part of what this group is based on right here, is creating friendships. And I think through those, I think it's really helped everybody in a lot of ways in the conversations of that. But I think through these groups, though, one of the things that it helps demonstrate to us is how you build friendships. And in that, you must spend time together. You got to talk to each other. You got to listen. And by that, hopefully, we grow closer in those friendships. And so I want everybody for a minute to think about a great friend that you have had, that you may not talk to anymore or has passed on, but think about that friend for a minute. And what I want to talk about a little bit is just some of the qualities that made that person such a great friend. And what I'm going to do is just talk about a few that I had and in research thought about, but I also want to put a key phrase that represents that we might talk about in just our general conversation. And to me, first and foremost, they show up. You know, when you think about a great friend, they're going to be there for you. They don't care if it's inconvenient for them. They don't care if it's comfortable, and maybe even dangerous, depending on what you do for a living or what friendship you have. But one of the common things that you kind of hear from time to time is when you have a great friend, somebody may say, man, I'd take a bullet for you, right? Hopefully most of us aren't in that situation where we'd have to, but you probably heard that before, right? So next, they see your blind spots and they love you anyway. And so they may even call you out on those. So just thinking through that, you know, how many times do you have a friend that shoots you straight, that says, man, you're blowing your life up, or you may need to change this about yourself if you want to be a better person or handle this situation right. They root for you. They're always in your corner telling you that you got this. They're not superficial. They're willing to go deep with you. You can have deep conversations with you. Let's be real. They make your friendship a priority. So in that, no matter how busy I am, I'm going to be there for you. They're great listeners. How many of us have ever told somebody, if you ever need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. I'll listen. They make you feel good when you're with them. How many times have you had a tough day, and one of the best things that could happen is you go hang out with a friend. That makes your whole evening feel better. Mm-hmm. And finally, they're patient with you. So how many times have you told somebody, you know, that you'd wait on them, you're willing to wait on them, whenever they're ready to talk, you'll be there for them. I think those are all things, and reality is there's so many more that you could think of and talk about, but hopefully the person that you thought of, you saw a lot of those types of characteristics in them, right? And so we talked a little bit about some of the qualities of a friend. Let's talk a little bit about why strong friendships are important. So I'm a father to a 14-year-old son, Jackson, who many of you know. I have a little girl. She just turned 10 Monday, Aniston. And one of my prayers is that they always do a great job picking great friends that will support them, help give them sound advice, and only help them grow in their faith. How many times have y'all heard the phrase, show me your friends and I'll show you your future? Yep. That's something that I think is real in that. And so our friends have a strong impact on what we do, how we live. They can be a great influence for us, or adversely, they can be a bad influence for us. And I think it's important that we know when we're engaging in those situations, though, because it's important to grow a friend network. And sometimes it's important to reach out to somebody that's headed in the wrong direction so that you can try to be a good friend for them. And so I think it's real important to understand those qualities, know why it's important to have good friends, but also know when you're engaging in a certain situation from a friendship standpoint so that you can help grow those. But the reality is friendships can come in many ways. And just a few that I wrote down. Obviously, family, in a lot of instances, are close. You would consider them friends. Your spouse that you're living life with and in your relationship. Your church family. Co-workers. School friends that you still hang out with from over the years. Community connections that you have. And I think one of those things in all of those is, to me, it's real important that you know that all of those help support and round a friend network. And that network is there to support you when you need them, but also so that you can be there for them in different situations. Because I think a lot of times, you know, like a work situation, if you think about if most of your friends come from your work environment, what happens if you change jobs, or if you retired, or what if you did those? Would that friend network still be there for you? Like, what brings you together and ties you together? And a lot of times in a work environment, it's work. you would consider them friends, but it's not the same friendship. And like community connections, you know, there's different aspects of friendship there. So I think it's important that we recognize, to me, that having a network and focusing on growing a network is a good thing. But the biggest thing is when you grow that network effectively, they are there for us when life gets hard. They coach us into being a better person. They're there for us in our struggles. They lift us up when we need it most, and they love us when that's what we need. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I say those phrases, does that make you think about our relationship with Jesus and what he does for us? Mm-hmm. And I think it's important because when we have strong friendships and we understand friendships and a relationship with God, it supports us in being good friends on this side of eternity and how we treat them. And so now that we've talked a little bit about, through, to me, some of the qualities of friendship, why friendships are important, I want to focus a little bit more about our friendship with God. And so I mentioned earlier about our scripture, and it's in John 15, 13 through 15. And that scripture says, and you'll have to tell Bert that I did bring my Bible. He told us last week that you couldn't read in public a scripture without being come from a Bible. So I do have one from that, but I've got some later in here that my fingers just won't turn that fast. So you'll have to tell him I got a 50. Yeah. But John 15, it says, let's see here. I'm sorry, 15, 13 through 15. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I called you friends, for everything that I've learned from my Father I have made known to you. So earlier, I talked about friends showing up for us, even when it's dangerous, and I referenced taking a bullet. The reality is Jesus already did way more than that for us. He suffered way more than that for us. And so I think when we think about that, you know, he died so that we could have a friendship with God. And so, you know, in understanding that, I don't know about y'all, but, you know, anytime I'm doing something like this, I feel like I convict myself sometimes on what I think about. I learn a lot from doing it. And so I think it just really hits home, like when we talk about friendships, there's no greater friend we have than that right there. And being able to complete our friendship and have that. And so throughout Scripture, we're taught to grow in our friendship with God. And here's just some different verses that are in your books there. But Psalm 46:10, take time to rest, draw close to him. Hebrews 12:28 through 29, be grateful and worship him. Isaiah 55:1 through 3, listen to him. John 15:4 through 5, stay close to him. Proverbs 3:5 through 6, trust him. John 15:12 through 13, obey him, do what he says. John 3:29 through 30, celebrate him, center life on him, not on ourselves. And Proverbs 17:6 through 7, know he is with you in adversity and call on him. And so I think when you start shaping those up, you can keep referencing those back to what makes a great friend and what it teaches us about friends. Because if you have a great friend, typically if they give you advice, you listen, right? And you know that they've got your best interest at heart. And I think sometimes for us, you know, we feel like we're being led in a direction, but it's tough to really hear that and believe that that's where we're being pushed to go. And so I think it's important that we continue to focus in and grow in listening and obeying. But I do want to circle it directly back to some of the things that we talked about, that, you know, when you see all of this, and we circle back to what I said earlier, he always shows up for us. He sees our blind spots, and he loves us anyway. He's always rooting for us. He is willing to go deep with us. He makes us a priority. He is the ultimate listener. He makes us feel great when we're with him. And he's always patient with us. And so when you put those together, to me, I think it just really shows that friendship. But I think the biggest thing, for me from a takeaway and how I'll close it out is I mentioned earlier that to foster strong friendships, we have to spend time together. Talk, listen, and grow closer. That was the comment that I made when we opened up. And so, how do we do this with God, I think, is the question. It's what does that look like? And I wanted to just talk through some application methods on how to spend time and grow in our friendship. And I feel like that we all know these, but I think in the busyness of our life, at least for me, those become a challenge, and you have to work through priorities. But you pray often, not just when things are tough, but regularly. We read and study in the Word often. We listen when He speaks to us, and we seek to obey that. We challenge ourselves to grow in friendships. And I think the biggest thing with that, especially in a church family, is that we challenge ourselves to what our next steps look like. Is that serving? Is that being a part of a multiply group? Is it leading a small group? Because I think sometimes in those ways, that helps us grow our friendship with God at the same time of growing our friendship and bringing people up in here because it challenges us. And I really believe that you grow the most when you're challenged. And so that's what I've got for tonight. So again, I think every time I talk through things like this, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to everybody else in that, because one thing I will say is that it's funny because in my work, I speak a lot. I public speak on things. But by nature, when I'm not doing these things, I prefer to be at home and not necessarily focus on friendships as much. I think there's times where I have to challenge myself even to get out and do those things and in conversation because friendships are worth having. They're worth supporting. They're worth growing into. But in the busyness of our life, sometimes we can very easily say that we're going to stay at home instead of helping a friend, or stay at home instead of doing that, especially if you're, if you have an introvert nature. And so that's a challenging point in itself on how we get out and do things, because to me, one of the things that I've learned in life, I talked earlier about growing in my faith and it being as an adult. When I look through a better part of my life early in my career, I didn't prioritize friendships. I prioritized my career. And that's something that as I've grown more and more and more, I just don't believe in doing. I'm blessed for what I do, but I really focus in on how can I use that to help others, because that's one of the biggest things that I can grow in, and I might be able to help somebody with. So hopefully there was something that spoke to you in this, because I think that's the biggest thing, is that we all take something away every time we meet and talk, and we grow as friends together. So I appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate Mike asking me to speak, and I guess we'll break up into our groups.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, that was good. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Tell you what, why don't we just let's do 2 groups of 7 instead of breaking out into super small groups. Let's go with Alex. Can you lead one? And then Ben, can you lead one? Sure. Sweet. All right, Alex and Ben, let's break up into groups with those guys.